Hey, good morning, everybody. It's really an honor and a pleasure for me to be here. You know, I got to thank General Yellen and the rest of the Quad A team for putting on another great event. You know, and all the senior leaders of the Army past that are here and the present. And I tell you, I think if you watch some of those soldiers walking across the stage yesterday, or you see some of them down on the floor, you see some of the future Army leaders in this audience too. So some great cab commanders, some great warrant officers and soldiers. You know, I'm kind of on short final here. I'll change command. I want to put this out because there's been some bad numbers on the net at different places, but I'm going to change command on the 12th of June to Major General Jim Richardson. And what's important there is that will be the 4th Jim out of 5 that have commanded AMCOM. Started out with Jim Pillsbury, Jim Miles, Jim Rogers, and somehow Jim McConville got into the 101st before they could slate him into AMCOM, and he escaped, and somehow Jim Barkley did the same thing, got out. But it's what I would tell you is if you're one of those cab commanders or senior aviation leaders and your name is James or John or something, I'd start going by Jim. There's a great job out there that's just waiting for the next Jim to come along. And I think I got the job because there wasn't a guy named Jim, so they went for handsome instead. So at least that's what I'm going to claim. You go to the next slide, please. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the sustainment community and just do some wave top things. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on most of these slides that you see, but at first I thought yesterday, you know, Congressman Mo Brooks is my congressman in my district, and I get to talk to him a lot, and I thought I might continue his speech for a minute, but then I thought better of that. And so I'm going to talk about some of the things that General Barkley talked about, and also then some other parts of what the sustainment community is doing to ensure that we have the ability to fly the aircraft we need to fly the flying hours, and maintain this portfolio the best we can. And we did this as an integral part of the ARI. So I'm not going to talk much about ARI because many of the other leaders have, and we'll answer some questions on the floor this afternoon if anybody has them on that. This is the funding stream that AMCOM is looking at for the next few years. And what it really shows is the challenge that all of us have. It shows our base program and then what we've gotten from OCO. And the ability to use OCO money to sustain our fleets and to sustain the portfolio has been very, very significant over the last few years. But we're going to lose that. And as we've tried to transition things into the base budget to ensure we have the minimum requirements, in many cases up on the Hill and at OSD, it was easier to vote on an annual basis versus a POM. And so they moved things back out of that base and put them back into OCO. Well, you can see where we're going to be in the future, below the requirements or below the needs, so we have got to stretch every dollar, make every dollar, get the most out of every dollar that we have. And I'm going to show you some things that we're trying to do within the sustainment community and the acquisition community. But I tell you, it also is going to take operators. It's going to take cab commanders to be very conscious of where we are. And in some cases, as General Barkley talked about tiered readiness, I don't think we're in a situation of tiered readiness as much as cab commanders and commanders below that level will make decisions on readiness on what they can afford to do at specific times. Next slide. You know, this is the first, the color scheme is the different fleets that we have. This will change significantly with ARI as the OH-58s come out of the portfolio, but you can see where we are now, and then you can see the line going across with the flying hours. And you see the dip in the flying hours as we move into the future. We come out of the AOR, which gives us significant hours along with the schoolhouse. Most of the flying hours really are in those two locations. You see the increase in the fleet, though, pretty much across the board on the other systems. And that's why we have to do the best things that we can, because the fleets are going to continue to be there. The program is still strong. We need to ensure that we have the ability to train all of the crews and the personnel that we need to keep those systems viable and to keep our capability to support the ground force viable. Next slide. This is kind of some of the meat of what I want to talk about here, and it's a busy slide, and I know that, but I'm going to start over on the left side with the what we look at is the top 200 cost drivers. And the interesting part of this is the acquisition community looks at the top 200 readiness drivers. And so between the two of those, we figure out what parts are common between those two, and it really lets us focus on where we're going, working with the community, our OEM partners and such, to find out what we need to attack first to make our platforms more viable and increase readiness at a decreased cost. So we compare those top 200, and we continually work those. Again, you work off one, and we have some significant savings that we have shown over the course of the last couple of years, and in many cases have gotten some significant support from headquarters DA, because we've proven those savings versus just talked about savings. You know, it's easy to talk about savings and say how much you're going to get, but what we've tried to focus on over the last year or two is to go back in and prove out what we said, and in most cases the savings have actually even been more significant than what we had talked about. The number 2, if you see the red 2 over there in the kind of the graph across the top, that's the cost per cab using kind of a common standard, but you see that different cabs have spent significantly different amounts of money to maintain their readiness at approximately the same levels. Now, all cabs aren't the same, all mission sets aren't the same, but we have multiple ways of looking at this to find out where we have problems. If we have maintenance issues, if we have training issues, if we have other things that we need to look at besides necessarily just a material solution to help us to improve ourselves. You know, you go down to 3, the targeted group. Again, what we found, cost drivers, along with what the PM has found as readiness drivers, we attack those. We make a more reliable part, a better part, a cheaper part, or we compete for parts, and we drive those costs down. The bottom right kind of talks about what I was saying with the how we've done, and PIA's post-initiative analysis. We've had systems that we've saved 20 to 1 of the cost. Next slide. Now, this is just a portrayal that shows how we really have done in some of these fleets. And you see across the board is we've moved to more modernized aircraft, and this is where the acquisition community has taken the results of the past and used them in the acquisition process to make sure we're correcting things that we've seen or improving things that we've seen. So between modernized fleets and modernized components, you'll see that we have driven the cost per flying hour down significantly. Now, this is basically parts. This is trying to come as close as we can to an apple comparison versus once you put fuel in, once you put a bunch of other things in there, you can skew data sometimes. And one of the things actually in reality we've had a very difficult time over the years is determining the exact cost per flying hour so that we can get that into the building and get support for that. Next slide. This is a different way of portraying it, but it shows you the cost per flying hour the last 10 years, the success that we've had. You know, part of that is CBM. Conditions-based maintenance has been in the discussion phases for 10 years or so. Most of our aviation platforms are outfitted with all the sensors, but it's our ability to take that data, consolidate it, and then use the data to find, to analyze it, to get the right information back so we can use it. And again, we've been pressing some things. We've been working with the G4, the Army G4 on some issues associated with this. And there's 3 basic ways that CBM has helped us to do things. It's helped us in many cases to reduce the number of spares that we have, again, saving money that can go back into some other part of the portfolio. It's allowed us to change our maintenance processes, where in some cases we changed a part out at 1,000 hours. We've changed and moved that to 1,500 hours or 2,000 hours based on the reliability that we've seen in the components. Or in some cases, it's allowed us to change the maintenance processes themselves and reduce the maintenance process to cut time, to cut soldier time, man-hour time associated with each of those aircraft. So we've seen significant savings in multiple ways associated with the CBM data. Our challenge is having the amount of people to do the analysis to continue to get that same return on investment. And cost-wise readiness and CBM are both in that way. Recently, the G4, based on some of our data, provided us another couple of $1 million to get more people to do this analysis and therefore continue to reinvest our dollars to get that return on investment. If you don't put some dollars in, you'll never gain the savings. And so we've really gotten a lot of great support from headquarters DA on doing that. Next slide, please. Change scope just a little bit. In the last couple of years, we've changed to the AFM contract, and you can see we actually have 5 regions of this contract, 4 across CONUS and 1 OCONUS. Very successful transition is what it really does. Is you can see the contractors that have won each of those regions and are operating there. But what it has done is allowed contractors to have specific regions, kind of a balanced set of aircraft that they're working on. But it keeps the same contractor working on each of those, and we don't have opportunities where we'll have multiple contractors working the same site, crossing boundaries and things. And it allows that contractor to determine where he needs his people the most and flex based on the workload within the different areas. We're not totally finished with this. We did the OCONUS last, and we've about halfway implemented the OCONUS. We've still got some work to do in the Pacific with Hawaii and Korea as kind of the final leg of transition. Once we do ARI and we move cabs around and we move aircraft around, we'll have to rework some of this to, again, rebalance. But overall, this contract, and it also has taken place at the LRCs, which was previously known as DOLs to most everyone, as we have taken over, Army Materiel Command took over the DOLs, now called LRCs. AMCOM has taken over the aviation part of those programs. And so this, again, ensures the same contractor may be working that, and pass-back maintenance is working reset. And again, it has allowed us to be much more efficient time-wise and dollar-wise. Next slide. Another thing that has come up and continually gets a relook is our support from our civilian counterparts. We have a significant number of LARs worldwide. You can see that on the chart. But we have people located with each of the different cabs, with each of the different units to ensure that we have that same capability across the board. FSRs also from different OEMs that are out there. The return on investment for many of these people are huge. But I want to go back to something that General McConville touched on earlier, and that's we've got to get green suiters back doing green suit maintenance and green suiters doing green suit tasks. And that'll help us bring some of the costs down as we replace the contract workforce that we have become so dependent on. Not replace in total, but gradually wean ourselves from some of that. Contractors have always been a part of our formations and will always remain a part of our formations, but not in the sheer numbers and the reliance that we have on them today. We've got to get some green suiters to work hand in hand and ensure our skill sets are there, re-green our soldiers and soldier mechanics, and then gradually phase out some quantity of those contractors. We're working a little bit with them for our FSRs. In the past, again, we've had the luxury of having OCO dollars that have allowed us to fund many things inside of AMCOM with OCO, and it allowed us at AMCOM to pay for many of these FSRs. As the OCO dries up, that's something we can no longer afford to provide for the units, and so units are having to make the decision, is it worthwhile to maintain those FSRs? We're working a program, again, with the Army staff to maybe get this moved into the TTPEG and come out of the flying hour program off the top, so units aren't having to make that decision. And in most cases, if you look at just the dollar cost savings of the FSRs, it's 5 to 10 to 1 versus the cost of the individual, and that doesn't even include the readiness that we're gaining because of them. So significant capability there. The other one that General McConville talked about that I want to hit on too, and it's kind of like that same re-greening, but I think we also need to look at keeping our soldiers, our non-commissioned officers engaged to the levels that we have done over the last 12 years. And as a logistician, I'll give you an analogy from a logistician's point of view, that we have a staff sergeant that may be in charge of a 20-truck convoy resupplying around Ring Road from Bagram to Kandahar, or may have gone from Kuwait up to Balad. And that staff sergeant was in charge of 40 people and 20 trucks full of supplies. And he did the entire convoy route. He changed ROEs where he needed to, did all that sort of thing, responsible for those lives. And we bring him back to Fort Campbell, And if he's going to run a range, if we're going to run an M16 range at Fort Campbell, what is that E6 authorized to do? He's a safety on the right or a safety on the left. You know, we just, for the last 12 years, we've allowed soldiers, non-commissioned officers to show their capabilities and what they can do and the responsibility that they can have if we allow them to do that. And we've got to continue that type of engagement as we come back to CONUS. And we can't always worry about the risk aversion that we've had in the past, and keep these senior non-commissioned officers engaged, keep them doing the things they're doing, or else they will leave. Our best will leave because they have too much capability for what we're allowing them to continue to do. Next slide, please. You know, we're in a period where we're going to transition a significant number of systems from procurement into sustainment, and this is not just across the aviation field, but across the Army. And what we haven't done is we haven't transitioned any major systems for 15 years or so. And it is a significant event to do this, and we haven't planned it properly, we haven't programmed it properly, in that now instead of the sustainment of these systems coming from the ASALT community and the PM community, it should transition over to the sustain peg for the logistics system to take over. And those things have to be palmed, and we have not palmed and received the dollars or transitioned the dollars in the right time frame. So we've got a lot of work to do to ensure that we are prepared people-wise and dollars-wise to transition these systems. The other thing that's important to me on this is a part of a discussion, and as one of my last opportunities to talk to everybody, we used to show a chart routinely that showed that 30% of the cost of a system was in procurement, 70% was in sustainment. Well, I challenge that to say that I think about 10% of the cost of a system is procurement and 90% is sustainment. That 30-70 was based on a 20-year life cycle. And if anybody out there knows a system that we've kept for only 20 years, they need to let us know, because again, we're talking about aviation systems that will be in there for 50 to 70 years. So if the cost of that sustainment is that important, we need to ensure that we're working that from the beginning, from the very beginning of the procurement cycle, ensuring that we're providing a system that is cost-effective, that we can maintain throughout that entire life cycle. Next slide. Sustaining systems, again, we're already short in many of the dollars that allow us to do the things that you see across the bottom. Won't spend a lot of time there, but the criticality of these things it's critical that we do maintain them. There's a couple of things that as the Aviation and Missile Command Commander that I have a responsibility to that we will fully fund and ensure is always there, and that's airworthiness. As the Airworthiness Authority, we will never drop that mission. We will fund it as far as it goes. And another responsibility I have is calibration for the Army, both aviation and ground systems. We will not let that fall because we can't unvalidate or invalidate every maintenance procedure that we do because our equipment is not calibrated effectively. So we'll do that, but we've got a lot of critical safety items and things that we need to ensure we have an industrial base to handle, and we're relatively short on the dollars to ensure that we can continue those actions. Next slide. Public-private partnerships, again, this is mainly to our civilian counterparts here in the audience, but there's a lot of opportunities to work with our depots, with Corpus Christi and Letterkenny, in my case, on multiple systems. We have some great partnerships out there today. As we downsize both into civilian industry and in the military, we don't need more facilitization. We need to properly and effectively use the facilities that we have. And I would just tell you, if you've got ways to do that, come and see us. We are glad to partner, and I think they ultimately can be some significant win-wins for both the public and for the Department of Defense. Next slide. You know, as I close, I tell you, there's some things that we've got to continue to do across the sustainment community, and again, our job is to support just like the aviation community supports the ground soldier. Cost-wise readiness has shown some significant benefits, and there's still a lot of work we can do and a lot of places we can continue to improve. The reliability that we have developed into systems allows us to right-size our inventories and right-size our support capability there. And we have to do that. It takes continual adjustments of systems to predict the future and make sure we have the right parts on hand when we have a totally different op tempo, a totally different flying program than what we've seen over the last couple of years in Iraq, Afghanistan, and that sort of thing. So we've got a supply system that's built on wartime usage rates with different flying portfolios, And we've got to make sure that we right-size that and don't put extra money into things that we don't need. Again, viability, we've tried to, over the last couple of years, one of the things I've tried to do is really get visibility across the supply chain from the artisan, from the wholesale manufacturer to the artisan putting it on an aircraft. And we're not there yet. And I would hope to be there this August, but I think it's going to be next year before we get there, as the Army puts a significant focus onto auditability and that sort of thing. Some of our other automated systems are not progressing as fast because we've had to really focus on that auditability piece. But we've got a long way to go there, and I think, again, manufacturers know more about their systems than we ever will because they care about it because it's their livelihood just like it is ours, but they're managing smaller numbers than we are across the board. So along that line, figure out what's CLS, what needs to remain CLS, what needs to be a part CLS, part green suit maintenance, and what should be done specifically by the Army itself. Again, we've got a lot of ways to go. This is a great community. It's a very tight-knit community. The discussions that the six-pack has almost every Wednesday ensures that we're speaking with one voice, and that is not the way the rest of the Army works. And that's why, as Mike was just up here talking about, that support we get from the building and the support we get to make sure that we're ready for the future is because of the great work that that team does, led by Mike now and Kevin Mangum for the last couple of years, to ensure we do speak with one voice and plan with one voice. So it's been an honor for me to be a part of this community. I look forward to seeing some of you and answering some questions down on the floor this afternoon. And I thank you very much. As one closing comment, you know, E.J. Sinclair was my beast squad leader at West Point. So it is a wonder that I even survived my lieutenant days with that kind of a training and upbringing. Thank you very much.